Hi, I'm Julia Bruton. This is about We Are Woman, a podcast exploring female and new aspects on the topic of VR.
Hi everyone, it's VR Woman again, and today I'm sitting here with Paula Strunden, right? That's the perfect way to say your last name. Paula is an architectural designer, a researcher into presence and immersion, and an XR creator that I met last week in Berlin during a presentation of her workshop, which we will very soon talk about. Before we dive into that, Paula, would you be so kind as to tell the audience who doesn't know you yet how you actually got involved with XR and what your background is that led you to XR?
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and see you again. And my background or the way how I got to work with VR took some time. So I'm trained as an architectural designer. So I studied architecture in Vienna and then went for an Erasmus to Paris, where I was asked, so this was back in 2013, to design a virtual reality center. And this was kind of before Oculus was out. So also when Googling VR, you wouldn't, I wouldn't understand what it is apart from kind of, being some kind of experience where people pop their head into TVs. And so I was designing a center, not knowing really for what kind of experience it was. But I think this early kind of, thinking about something that I hadn't experienced made me super excited, of course, to be able to immerse myself one day in it. And then I was working in architecture practice. I was working in Switzerland for Herzog de Meuron, and they had the Oculus DK1, and I would spend my nights kind of going on my first journey on boats, and I don't know, instead of modeling the hospital that I was working on back then, I was actually super excited about these very early experiences that I've done. And this then also led me to doing my master's also in architecture, but I did it in London, where I could combine film with architecture. So it was more turning around like narrative development, storytelling, using architecture, kind of 3D modeling and like spatial design as a tool, but really trying to explore how I could do that with the technology or like with the medium of virtual reality. And I think because of my background in architecture, so really to think about atmospheres, to think of materials, of spaces, of how body move within spaces, I very quickly decided not to work with only the audiovisual potential of the medium, but to get as many other things into the equation as possible. So to really move into this realm of extended reality or mixed or hybrid reality by adding objects, bodies, like whatever I could get a hold of, basically.
And you said something in the preparation interview that we had, and I really like that. You said you want to approach XR as a medium and not connected to the technical background. Is that part of what you just told us, that you see the medium as something that has so many parts that you can actually include, where it's not just the goggles and how they work?
Yeah, I think I'm very, very much inspired also, throughout my work, but also in my research by female pioneers in the field. So there are artists, for example, Shar Davis or Brenda Laurel, that come from different backgrounds, so that are not kind of computer scientists or engineers, that early worked with the technology, and that defined an approach that can be summarized under the kind of notion of embodied virtuality. So Shar Davis, for example, developed these interfaces where you could navigate the virtual space by breathing. So when you would breath in, you would lift in the virtual space, and when you would breath out, you would descend in it. And I think this idea of coupling or merging or kind of synchronizing sensory modalities in a way that you would usually not experience through this technology. So just to use it for its potential to connect things in real time in a way that you have not experienced before, I think this is super exciting. And I think the visual is one idea of it. So now, of course, with the headset that we have, because they're screen-based, so we hear something, we see something, this gives us directly this idea that we can amplify or multiply or augment the visual. But of course, by adding trackers to it or allowing physical objects to be part of it, but also taking into consideration our physical material body or the physical body in the physical space in which this experience happens, it basically allows you to kind of multiply or amplify all these elements or recombine them in a different way. And I think at the moment, at least, the term of virtual or augmented or mixed reality is often a bit, I think, or at least the understanding is often limited by the devices that are bound to it. So we think with an AR goggle, we can do a certain experience, whereas with a VR goggle is maybe a very solitary experience. But as for example, you've seen in the workshop last week, one person puts on the VR headset, but 6 other people in the space have a tracker on their body, and suddenly it's an experience that can be heard in the whole space. So I think there's so many ways to experience this idea of spatialized, embodied, kind of real-time computing that can be that can go beyond only this visual representational potential of the devices, or like maybe
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Paula. I was really, really fascinated by the workshop, or let's say by the presentation of the workshop, because I was not part of it, the workshop. I was there for the presentation. And you called it Virtual Vibration, a dance workshop in XR. And just for the listeners out there, so what happened during the presentation is we were able to watch dancers, and the dancers had trackers, one tracker on one part of their body. And with a certain movement, they would then trigger a certain sound for this specific tracker they had on. And so when they moved around the space in front of the audience, there was sound connected to their movement, and we watched. And that already had a layer of thickness. I don't know another word than this one to explain of the presentation. And then eventually there was a last person, and she put on the goggles, and she could see now the trackers as balls in her virtual world. So she would go after the balls and touch the other dancers. And when she would touch the tracker in her virtual world, the visual would change. And this was a part that we, as the audience in the beginning, we could see on a screen because you had a beamer there and we could see what she could see. But to come back to what you just said, I would love to pick your brain a little bit on all these different layers that you kind of created with the people in the workshop, and how would you approach the idea of a workshop like this? Where did it start, and how did you get it to where it was?
Yeah, I think one thing that I'm really fascinated about in my work is how the medium of embodied virtuality, or working with this technology, can dissolve our individual bodily boundaries and allow us to connect with others, like with other people, but also with other things, with other spaces, and kind of increase like our sense of maybe empathy towards them. And for that particular workshop, Virtual Vibration, so it was based on an installation that I had built and exhibited as part of my PhD research, which is called Rhetorical Bodies. So that's a collaborative piece where 2 people, so one professional dancer who is performing also for the audience, is inside the experience, and another person goes in to meet them, and their bodies are represented as these really kind of fluid, blobby, kind of morphing shapes, a bit like the content of a lava lamp. So you are this kind of thing, and each of your limbs and body parts is one of these. So you merge with the other person, but also with your environment. And what I experienced then when doing that is that your kind of, your identity and how you relate to the other person, but also the environment changes. And I thought it would be really exciting to explore with a bigger group. So this was the first time that actually I explored together with Viviana De Fazio, who's a professional dancer. So she was part of the workshop, and then we worked together with dancers and artists from UDK and HZT, how a common or collective or maybe like a distributed body could function, or I don't know if functional could be explored maybe more. So basically each of the participants created a movement, but also created a sound through their bodies that was recorded. And then that sound was tracked by an object tracker. And depending on the position or the rotation, but also the tempo in which that was moved, the sound was then paired to the pitch or the volume, which basically allows you to hear the movement of not only your own limbs but also the other limbs. So I think when thinking of like bodily perception, also spatial perception, we know that it's very multisensory. So we know that we not only see and hear, but we also smell, but then of course we also move, or they're not only these kind of like 5 big senses, but there are all these different sensory modalities that contribute to our experience in space. And apparently there's like 43 or 44, I don't know, but one of them, which I think is really exciting, is proprioception. So like our ability of knowing where of our body parts are where without having to look at them. So of course we know that for ourselves, but I don't know that for you. So I have to look at you in order to see where your body parts are. If we combine them with the sound though, so we kind of like amplify your bodily movements, I hear it and suddenly I don't have to so it's really difficult to describe when you're not immersed in it yourself. But basically what it does is that by coupling senses in an unprecedented way, it kind of dissolves a bit the boundaries of like where your own body kind of ends and where the other body starts. And what happens then when you're more people, so there it was like a kind of distributed body among 6 participants, is that the center shifts, and it's constantly shifting. So it's not, you cannot, if you're 2 people inside, I think that's what happened a bit with rhetorical bodies. People were describing that they fell in love and they felt really connected, and like it was very kind of touching and
so very intense.
Very intense. Yeah, I think like the emotional impact is very strong of this experience. But then when you're 6 people, it's not in between. Somehow it's an experience that maybe like the intensity of the experience I also hadn't felt as that before. And the kind of maybe like this idea of like anchoring an identity within like a certain, I don't know, sensory modality or something is constantly shifting. And I think it's really nice because it really gives you this feeling that like the kind of this hybrid body is very fluid, it's very dynamic, it's not bound within one, but kind of I don't know, situated in between these people. So I think this is something that I find as an idea very exciting to not only theorize upon, but to actually feel. So I think maybe long story short, like the reason why I built these experiences, or why I've been exploring these installations that have all these different layers, is to find ways that you can actually tangibly feel something that is always there. So my body parts are always there, they're moving in a certain ways, yours are there, but to connect them in a way that I can actually feel them. So I can maybe touch them, or I can hear them, or I can move them in a way that I wasn't able before. And usually this is something that I think not as people often speak about. Virtual or extended reality is something that gives you this feeling of going out of your body or escaping or leaving your body behind, but rather the opposite. It gives you the feeling of connecting and like binding and understanding how your cognition is very embodied and embedded and enacted. And I think, yeah, what's so beautiful about these experiences is that you don't, you just feel it. And this kind of, I think the idea is that it, allows you to speak maybe differently about it, or be able to, connect things then differently.
It was amazing to see within this presentation, and then you also allowed the audience to pick up the trackers or to pick up the goggles and also experience what you've created there with the dancers. And it gave an insight to me, and this is fascinating, where technology can help you really as a human being to understand yourself, your body, your being rooted in different forms than what is possible in any other medium that I've met so far and that I've got involved with. And I think this is something we should dive deeper in and try more and show more and give people more the possibility to get in touch with this, as you say, medium, and with the possibilities it has, rather than just thinking of it as a flat screen in front of your eyes with a high-tech audio around it. Yeah, so that was...
I totally agree. So the installations I usually build, I think, of course, they are experiences. They're experience based. I call them models, so extended reality models. I think, coming from a spatial background, this is maybe one reason for it. But I think the other thing that you just said is that it helps us to understand how we kind of constitute reality, or how we make sense of it. And I think, to my understanding, reality is something that is kind of evolving moment by moment, and kind of it's constantly becoming. And I think for this, being immersed in these models that allow you to connect your senses maybe in another way, or kind of experience maybe moments of disruption or glitch, or where these things don't work together. I think this is so exciting to explore. And I think this is something that, when only connecting the audio and the visual, it's kind of not, I think you can create beautiful narratives and very interesting stories, and I think you can elaborate on certain contents, of course, very in a very sophisticated way. But I think this idea of understanding how your embodied interaction with things works, I think this, when you create a model that is built on some kind of physical structure, or that integrates other objects or other bodies or other kind of spaces, so basically that instead of pushing these things away, or saying, oh, no, we want something that is independent of this, to just invite them all in and kind of let them come up. I think this is something that's very exciting, I think, for working with technology. And I think this includes, of course, tracked objects or things, but this also very much includes this idea of working with people from other disciplines. So I think, when you collaborate, in the case of that workshop, with a dancer, or you collaborate with a sound designer. I mean, I have a background in architecture, but then, of course, also somebody who comes more from like fine arts, or somebody who comes from performative background. I think theater is a discipline that lends itself very excitingly to the medium. So I think by combining these kind of knowledges, this is where it becomes interesting to me, working with it. And therefore, I think also what you described, so that to integrate the audience, I think this is something that is just exciting to watch. It's not that we know how that is being done. I mean, but why not invite them to try for themselves?
Absolutely. And what I thought was interesting, that there was a person, and that person in the beginning said, no, I'm just a viewer. I'm not, I'm not going to get involved. And eventually that person did get involved, and then the person couldn't stop anymore. That was really beautiful to watch, actually. I want to know your take on quantitative research, and how important that is from your point of view when it comes to this medium, in the opposition to qualitative research, right? Where a lot of people, I guess, especially in this new medium at the moment, you know, they're pressing for numbers, or they're pressing, you know, for something they can take and put as a general something somewhere, make a statement, and then you know, have it wrapped up and packed. But what is your approach to the opposite, to the quantitative research, and where do you see the importance in it?
I mean, of course, my approach is also colored by my training. So of course, I'm trained as an architect, and I'm doing artistic or design-based research. I don't have any, I think, background in a discipline like, for example, experiential psychology or in neuroscience, where you would have learned to do quantitative research. So I think, I mean, apart from the fact that I can't do it or I've never done it, I think I'm just very excited about qualitative research methods in regards to the XR, because it is an inherently kind of experiential or experimental medium, where I personally think that language, but also numbers, or the way how we usually communicate, is lacking a bit ways to describe it. So I think I don't know, for example, one of the installations that I built as part of the PhD research, it's called Infrathin Magic, and this is built around the experience of the infrathin, which is a term that Duchamp developed. So it's like a neologism that basically he said it's impossible to describe it, and you can only give examples for this term. So he says, like, infrathin, for example, is if you lift up, you sit on a chair, and you get up, and I sit on the chair, and the seat is warm. So this is something everybody, I don't know, if you take the example of a toilet, everybody knows this feeling, but how do you measure that? How do you describe that? Or, for example, the thickness of a shadow, or it's like it makes something with your body, but you cannot describe it. And to me, in this experience of the infrathin magic that I built, it was like a kind of a ceremony. So it was like a ritual where you would be invited into the space that exists somewhere at the threshold in between, like the material and the virtual, or the actual and the virtual, like just to invite people into that realm where we can experience it, and there's something happening where it's exactly at this kind of like ambiguous or like paradox sensation of being in your body, in your room, inside the space, interacting with these things, but also, I don't know, being somewhere that's maybe more closer to being in your thoughts or being in your dreams. And I personally think that it is so exciting to just create these experiences and share these experiences, and then find ways to speak about them by actually practicing them or performing them. So I think this is rather than trying to measure that, but I think it's also because maybe I personally still lack vocabulary to describe it, or like somehow I think what, for example, I did last week as part of the workshop, this is like a format that I find much more exciting. So usually I develop installations, and then I discuss them, or I further research them by setting them up in like an educational framework, which is like a workshop or a summer school, and then you share it with others, and then you find ways to kind of speak about them. And I think this could be done through then, in terms of research, by kind of recording these conversations, or there's also usually things I always do for the installations, which is gathering immersions like reflections. So to ask them to write a bit, I don't know, a bit more like an experience report. So these kind of very, kind of almost like stories that people are telling, or what they remember, what they vividly remember, how they feel in their bodies. But I think I think for the way how I work, so like, of course, I built these models that try to find like all these different actors, or that acknowledge like the role of the invigilator is as important as the role of an object that I put in, is as important as the role of the actual space, is as important as you would have a very different experience going in than your sister, because maybe you have, I don't know, I don't know your sister.
She looks after different things than I do.
But so I think if you have a way of working that is trying to include all the things we cannot measure, you cannot apply. It's really difficult to then define what you want to measure, because I think it's more to try to find out.
So it's basically, it's about a very holistic approach, right? You can't say this one is more important than that one, because it's all together. It gives you basically what it can be or what it cannot be, and then depending on the person that comes in, and then it would be like measuring people all of a sudden, and that gets a very weird touch.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so much, I mean, in experience in general, like a large part of it is the subjective experience of a person. So it is, I might create an installation, but it's a bit like maybe if somebody goes to the theater also, you go to the theater, but the experience that you will have is very much informed by your memories, by your imagination, by maybe the weather outside or what you've eaten that day, the person that you sit next to, etc., etc. How you relate to the actors on stage, and whether you know the music or not. So I think the same with like an XR model, the person that goes in. I have experienced a lot that they see things that I have not designed. They hear voices that are not inside. So I think that's the beauty of it. I think when you tone it back, so usually my experiences are quite desaturated, they're very consistent, but they also have a certain abstraction to them, allowing people to see what they want to see, kind of, so to provide the space to bring themselves into it. And I think this is something that I find very exciting about working with it, that basically every person's experience is different, and that they are equally part of creating that reality, because it's their reality in the end that they're experiencing. Then I am, as a designer, kind of providing that platform. So I think in that sense, I am still very much of an architect, that I kind of, that I create a certain atmosphere or like an environment in which people then have their, kind of bring their own way of inhabiting that, or,
Mm-hmm. And what I'm so curious about, the future and the next years also when it comes to XR, is the language that we're going to develop in terms of describing what happened to us. Because of course it's very subjective, but the more we talk about it, the more we exchange, the more we'll probably find expressions, phrases, words that particularly describe something that does maybe not exist yet, because we have to still find the words for it in the virtual, in the XR kind of experience that we have it with it. And I'm super curious about that. And you're not the only person that has spoken so far about the fact, to find the language. How do we actually express what just happened, what we just, realized about ourselves or about something around us? It brings us so much more in connection also with what surrounds us. So that's,
I think one thing that I've been observing, what happens to many of us, of course, is that it's so I think what I described in the beginning, that it dissolves like a bit the center that comes out of you, so like the boundaries between you and others. But I think very generally it dissolves, of course, all these dichotomies. So I think like this, often binary differentiation between being inside and outside, or being on something, or like in something, or so that we often, of course, we perceive our thoughts or our imaginations, also memories, as being kind of inside of us. But like when we then dive into a world that reminds us maybe of scenes that we have only experienced in dreams before, what does then happen? And once we can kind of interact with them, we can touch them, what if we can smell them, what we can taste them, how does it make us feel about them? But then also, I think there's something that's really happening within this, but maybe this like dissolution of these binaries, or like rather trying to be kind of in between them or in the middle of them than always having to separate them. I think that's very interesting. And I think, of course, in regards to more kind of spatial structures or like spatial constellations, there's then also something that happens where the relations then between these things are being reconfigured also. So when I have physical objects in an XR experience, for example, I have a glass of water and I touch that glass of water and that brings me to the kitchen, versus when I touch the book that's next to me and it takes me to the living room, then suddenly I can have, and this could be like using objects to hold these spaces, but of course I can also have them at different parts of my body or like in relation to different people. So I think this possibility to relate. So what you've experienced in this workshop is to do that through sensory modalities, but of course this could also be done through spatial modalities, or kind of, I think this idea of re-relating, like this is really something that somehow I think this is really exciting to what that does to then us and how we relate to these things, or when
you don't usually like to use the controllers that come with any kind of VR set. Why is that?
Well, I never used them, but I think the very first experience I've done, there was no, I think it was like Oculus and there was no controller yet, so it was like more like an audiovisual experience. But already there I was working a lot with this idea that of course you can have a narrative happening above or below you, a bit like kind of theater that's all around you, that invites your body already to start moving within it. And then I started working with hand tracking, so these leap motion cameras. So that was before the Oculus had the hand tracking integrated. That I think it's so beautiful that in that virtual or extended reality realm, of course, the input in that world is you, or like your body. So how do you input that world? And I think the more intuitive, or kind of the more like easy and effortlessly you can move within that, the more likely it is to have an impact on like the potential that you can have. So I think we judge very much, or I don't know, judge is maybe not the right word, but like we feel the environment a lot by the effect that we have on it. So when I have my hand and I can touch its surfaces, but then I always work with physical objects that are also tracked. So I actually need my hand to, I don't know, move the chair or move something within that world, or put on a wearable. And by having them free, I'm free to interact with things. And I think when having the controller, this is something that Shar Davis was actually describing. I thought that was very beautiful. You have a very particular way of interacting, which is kind of you're controlling that world. So you have a trigger that you can pull. It's a bit like a gun maybe. So it's also very dominating, or kind of like penetrating way of wanting to control that world, whereas kind of moving, for example, walking through it or dancing within it, or I don't know, taking a chair within it to sit down, you're more being within that world without so purposefully or intentionally controlling it. But of course, I think in my experiences, I kind of translate this functionality of the controller in the whole body. So I say, for example, I track the head position, or I track the hand position, or I track the gaze direction. So this is, yeah, I mean, this is another discussion, but this, of course, also very much questions, yeah, our presence or kind of our control in that world. It's just that it's not so direct by pulling a trigger.
Mm-hmm.
But in the end, yeah, you use your body. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a very interesting notion. And I realized when I had the goggles on last week, when I had the chance to put them on and I had one tracker on my body, the first thing with my hands, and then, okay, no, there is no controller, right? And then after a time, I would walk around and I would actually realize, wait a second, how do I move, right? And how in my hands, and I had a feeling of being so much more in a dance vibe than I would have been if I, had anything holding my hands. And it's a distraction, basically, a little bit of what, what's really going on with myself. So
it creates a distance as well to the world now, because I think touch, of course, is a very immediate, it's like the moment. I mean, in that particular experience, because it was only a 3-day workshop, there were no physical objects or wearables, but so usually you would have in the works that I do objects, so that have a certain kind of tactile feedback, they have a certain texture, but they also have a weight, they have a smell. So materials within, in themselves, of course, they communicate numerous things to us, and by integrating them within these experiences, there's a lot that's happening on a much less conscious level that is kind of informing what you do or what you can do. And I think it's really it allows you to interact on a level that feels maybe a bit more intimate or kind of close, or also you basically don't have that distance through an additional device in your hands.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm really looking forward to more experiences in general, also for people to have the possibility to experience them without the controller situation. Let's move to the XR Atlas for a second. So you said what's important to you is also female pioneers. And as we know, the saying goes, we all stand on the shoulders of giants. And when it comes to XR, what probably not so much know out there, that there are a lot of female giants out there already. You created a project, the XR Atlas. Can you tell us something about it, and also what it actually implies on a level of information that you're trying to collect at the moment?
Yeah, I think this was something when I started my PhD research, and I was, of course, looking also in the history of virtual reality and trying to find out kind of how it developed, what are the references. And I think directly I was very inspired always more by the potential of the technology than by its actual application. So I think there are stories from the 1930s, more from like sci-fi literature, but then of course there are also lots of films, but there are a lot of I think this idea of thinking about, in a very speculative sense, what if we could inhabit in that way? What if we could interact with it that way? This was also something, always something that very much, inspired me. And I think why I personally was kind of, looking for content a bit like outside of the kind of maybe the history that you were presented with when you just Googled the term. And another thing that I quickly realized is that there is the history of the technology, and this may be also going back to the first thing that we discussed, why I think it's important to understand it more as a medium, is often confined within the history of the devices. So we look everybody knows, or everybody working with virtual reality or XR knows like the name of Ethan Sutherland or Morten Heilig. So these are the computer engineers or scientists that develop the viewing devices to be able to perceive these virtual augmented layers. But that doesn't mean that they kind of had maybe the most exciting thoughts of how that could be used or applied, or what that also meant for us using that. And I think this is where these female pioneers brought to me a perspective that I think that resonated so much with the way of how I was interested working with it, but that was also from the beginning very interdisciplinarily kind of set up. So there is a little video from Rebecca Allen, who's an artist that has also been working with technology for a few decades, and she was saying like 30 years ago that what it needs is that the people who use the computer should be speaking to psychologists and artists and musicians and I don't know, educators. So I think this idea that it's kind of too important to be left to scientists alone as a project, I think this is something she said, a few decades ago, and it's still, I think, very important. So it has not changed that. And I think this is something, at least in my research, so coming across all these female pioneers who were specifically in the 1990s very present, and there was a lot of work being created. I think this is something that is very inspiring, that I just thought it would be really important to share. And I think this is how this website for the XR Atlas came into being. So basically, I just took all the projects that I found exciting or inspiring, or that kind of helped me develop a more nuanced or like multi-sensory or embodied understanding in regards to XR, into this website, which is a participatory online platform. And the basic idea is that it expands kind of geographically, but also chronologically, but then also disciplinarily on this idea of what XR could or would or want to be. And so it ranges kind of from, I don't know, frescoes from, I don't know, the Renaissance to I don't know, a book from the 30s to a film that has been made now. So I think the XR Atlas specifically is also not focusing on this idea of female pioneers, but much more broadly to kind of create a bit like an alternative history, or a bit like a history that is not kind of bound by this dominant narrative that's written by the tech industry around the medium. And then within that, of course, you also find a lot of female pioneers, and there's this podcast that I've been doing, interviewing some of them. So this is also linked on the XR Atlas. So I think, it is an ongoing work, so it's also a participatory platform, so anybody can add to it. So the idea is also, there's this globe function now that I recently added with the graphic designer Alessia Scuderi that I worked on it with. And of course, something that we also realized is that all the references I have been working with, coming from German English speaking background, are mostly in the US or Canada or like Europe. And this is something that I'm also super excited to opening that up and finding out about works that are of course beyond that, and that we are not familiar with, because of course my bubble is another bubble that I'm opening it up there.
Yeah, no, I cherish that project. It's amazing. Go check it out. I'll have it also in the description for the podcast. Paula, it was wonderful speaking to you. I have a feeling it's not going to be the last time. I wish you all the best for now, and good work for your final PhD time that you have now in front of you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great meeting you and speaking to you. And thanks also for the work that you do. It's very inspiring.